2.8 million people have already died of the coronavirus worldwide. 75 million people died in World War II. And today in Myanmar and throughout the world, people continue to die in violence, whether that is war, civil war, or state-sanctioned violence. So what then makes the death of Jesus of Nazareth on a hilltop in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago unique and so worthy of remembrance today? Well, we know that Jesus died on the cross, but it's not how Jesus died which is so significant. What the Roman soldiers did to Jesus, crucify him, they did to 2 other people the very same day. No, what is significant is what Jesus himself did, that Jesus offered his life intentionally as a sacrifice on the cross. Jesus, in coming into Jerusalem, attracted attention to himself, and his Hosanna heralded entry into Jerusalem and his cleansing the temple were the actions of a man who was not hiding away. But at his trial before Herod and then with Pilate, Jesus did not defend himself. He entered into his death quite willingly, and his words of foreboding at the Last Supper that his body would be broken and his blood poured out were the signs of a man who showed he was in control and who freely chose his fate. But even in this, Jesus is not all that unique. Throughout history, there have been many martyrs for causes, for country and for faith. Think of Muhammad Bouazizi, the man whose death triggered the Arab Spring. Think of Emily Davison, the suffragette. Think of St. Maximilian Kolbe, the priest who offered his life for another prisoner in Auschwitz, and countless others whose names will never make the annals of history. The difference then is who Jesus intended his sacrifice to be for. Maximilian Kolbe died for one man, Emily Davison for the cause of women, Martin Luther King for African Americans and Gandhi for Indians. But Jesus offered his life for all people, for all humanity. And his words at the Last Supper were his will and testament, in which he willed that his blood would be poured out for all, for the forgiveness of sins. Now perhaps you or I might, in some moment of delusion or magnanimity, decide that we too will offer our lives as an offering, as a sacrifice for all humanity. But who are you and I to do that? We are responsible only for ourselves. We have no authority to speak for or act for the whole world. But Jesus did. And the letter to the Hebrews that we hear today depicts Jesus as the high priest in the Jewish mode. We're not familiar with that kind of priesthood anymore, but for Jewish people, they understood the high priest was appointed by God to offer sacrifice to God for all the people. And the early Christians came to understand Jesus as that high priest whom God had appointed to offer a sacrifice, not of a cow or a sheep, but of his very own life, as atonement and sacrifice for the whole of humanity. So it is who Jesus is that makes this difference, which makes his death on the cross so monumentally significant. You or I cannot trade our lives for the whole world, but Jesus could, because Jesus alone out of all humanity chose his humanity. Jesus, the Son of God, the Word made flesh, God within the Trinity, chose to take on humanity, chose to come and be human with us. And in doing so, Jesus bound humanity to divinity in a bond that can never be broken. And so he gave his death and all his actions in infinite value. Jesus could indeed speak for all humanity. He could act for all humanity. And his lasting greatest action was to offer himself as a perfect sacrifice which would outweigh the cumulative sin of all the world. Did it work? Did God accept this sacrifice? Even Jesus' apostles, who believed in him and loved him, thought that Jesus had failed when he died, and they ran away scared. They would have to wait for 3 days until that first Easter morning to find out if God had accepted Jesus' sacrifice and if Jesus was indeed who he said he was.